both you and Zach mentioned looking at the roster sort of in the context of where the league is going and where the game is going. Um, Maybe this is too big picture of a question, but where do you see the league going? Where do you see the game going?
I think the more interesting aspect of also what Chris asked is the game. If you look at any type of invasion game, so invasion team sports, whether it is football or ice hockey or soccer or basketball, like they're all going in the same direction. The demands on the players are getting higher and higher constantly in many ways. Scheduling, but also the pace of the game, the intensity that's required from the players. There's a clear development in the game, and it's coming from three different things. It's coming from the pace of play, it's coming from the effort that's required, but also the collective organization of the teams is so much higher than it has ever been. It doesn't always look that way because the means are a little bit different. There's a lot less scripted offenses in basketball, for example, than there were before. But that doesn't mean that the teams are worse organized. They're actually better organized because it looks more organic and it's harder to take away, and you have options after options that are also not predicated on the coach saying if not A then B, if not B then C, but it's more the players using the constraints of the situation and the quality of interaction. So I see this as a big question, especially in the NBA, maybe more than I know European soccer has battled this. Those guys basically play year round with the national team windows and a lot of games. I see big challenges ahead overall with what basically all of the teams want to do in order to maximize the winning, but making sure that player health is considered also, and that how many games we're playing and what the demands are for the players, and that they're still able to practice somewhat. And I think a lot of teams in the NBA have tried to solve that by just eliminating practice because the demands are so big, and I just nobody's sure about what the best measures are. So I think that's the biggest question overall moving ahead. But the direction to me is crystal clear because you can see it in every sport. And it's not like you can look at basketball like from the 60s and you can look at basketball from the 90s and it looks like the players are chilling on the court. You know, it just is like this. It might be more physical in some senses, but the players are not moving, you know? So the amount of movement that has happened and the high intensity movement is on a completely different level. So if we've had this trajectory now for about 70 years, like, what's the Lindy effect, you know?
No.
I think it's pretty safe to say that will continue, you know, and what that does to all the other parts, I think that's more of a challenge moving forward.
Tuomas, how would you self-assess this season? What do you think you did well, and where do you think you can improve?
Well, I want to preface that with we are in this situation because of our quality or our work. So it's not like a coincidence that we were a 25 win team. Everybody's got to take accountability in that. You know, it's not something you could just brush under the table. That was not our goal when the season started. Things happened, but in the end, we didn't end up in the place we wanted to be. And obviously, myself, I put a lot of, let's say, responsibility on myself to do the best that I can in this job. And this season did not go as one maybe would have hoped. I never really carry expectations into a season because things can happen. And then the self-evaluation, smart man once said that's a highly unscientific thing to ask coaches this or ask about their philosophy, because as Drew, you're well aware of, you know, in science you cannot be the subject and the evaluator at the same time. So I'll leave that to others. From my perspective, I would say it's an incomplete. a lot of stuff happened, some of them in our control, some of them out of our control. We all feel we can and need to do better, but I think that it will be in the future where we will know the stuff we did. The things that I'm very proud about, there are a lot of those too as a team. When we look at our first games and some of the games, for example, in March, there was tremendous development of the collective and individuals. Almost half the roster, or let's say at least a third of the roster, had their best seasons in the NBA. And when I talk about best seasons, I'm not only referring to like you know this as well as I do, that a lot of times it's like, yeah, this player now played 30 minutes instead of 20 minutes. That's why the stats are 50% higher. If you look at a lot of our guys, they not only improved, like we look at the per 36 stats, they improved their production, whether it was points or steals or blocks, while also improving their efficiency, in some cases pretty dramatically. And that's a completely different animal than improving, let's say, having the same 36 stats but just playing more. So there was tangible results, and I think this speaks volumes about the guys' preparation and approach, but also our training process and why we felt it was important to also get guys those game reps. We also have a much better understanding of our identity and how to apply it, and some of the competitive advantages we can keep working on the future, and that's an important part. The whole staff, it was built from scratch, essentially. I had never led or been in a staff with anybody here. So there was definitely a growth period in just looking at the clarity with the players and the staff going into this summer, for example, about what are some of the bottlenecks, what are some of the things we want to address, and how overall everything we do on the court interacts with the other teams. And the third thing that I thought was very positive and that I'm very proud of is that we kept working and we competed all the way to the end. And this, like, the season was very difficult. Probably had like 4 or 5 different iterations of the team, and to go through that without losing the enthusiasm or the will to work and to get better, I think it's unique, and that is definitely something that, you know, we could have chosen a different type of path a couple months ago, and we would have wasted those couple of months, and we knew it was going to be emotionally and physically tiring for everybody. But I do think we've laid the groundwork for future success.
You've got young players coming in. When you came in this year, you had a style that you wanted to play here. Obviously, that was somewhat sidetracked by injuries and so forth. How much of your approach was seen with this team, and what do you see as the future, as the identity of this team?
Well, style of play and identity are a little bit different things, and I've always tried to make a very clear distinction between the two, because I don't like identity to me is tied to those things we were like Lang asked earlier about, like where the game is going, speed of play, the effort that's required, the organization of the team, and I would say for us, the fourth cornerstone being learning, also being able to evolve, being able to adapt to the situations. And I think it's important to distinguish those two things, because the style of play you then choose for each team takes into account that identity. So we could talk about strategy, for example, takes into account that identity that you want to play with, but also takes into account who you have as players. And I think one of the hardest things we had going into this season was that Jaren was injured basically the whole summer. He came back a lot earlier, which is a testament to his hard work, and Zach was missing, and we had a very challenging situation in the beginning. So basically throughout the season, we're trying to patch things up for that current version, and that is kind of the reality of coaching. Like, you're never in an ideal situation, but we did have good, when we had periods of stability, I thought we made progress during those, whether it was the 11-game stretch where Zach played when we were 6th in the league in net rating with the second best defense, or the 11 games, for example, that Ty Jerome played, or we had a period from beginning of February to I think around halfway through March or like this, where we had the best half-court stretch in Grizzlies history with 105. So per possession. So like there were periods where it was kind of realized, but we were never able to put it together. And obviously that's a point of further, let's say, analysis for also to take the whole season into account now after the season. But the important part is not the analysis, it's the synthesis, what you do with that information in regards to the future, because unless that information is applied and improved upon, it doesn't really matter. So I think we're very clear on what we would like the team to express, but the means through which we get there, similar to what Chris was asking, you can go a lot of different avenues with that.
Back to kind of the where basketball is going question, you mentioned a lot of team sports are kind of moving in the same direction. Do you see, as you kind of build this thing moving forward, do you see there being a lot of stuff to take or to learn from other sports in terms of your philosophy and how you kind of build this organization and your team building?
Yeah, that's always been, I think, like a strength of our programs, that wherever we've been agnostic towards where that information is coming from or the improvement. And I think that one of the best ways to have, like, let's say if you're going to separate from the other teams, you basically have a few options. You can do more than the other teams can do. You can do it better, or you can do it a little bit differently. So in order to do differently, like have different outputs, you gotta have different inputs. And some of those different inputs for me have in the past been other sports. Whether it is, taking the idea of that was, popularized from let's say 2008 on in European or in soccer, about the German term I think is gegenpressing, which was from Jurgen Klopp, but the counter pressing, which also the Guardiola teams do, and we just applied it to the offensive rebounding phase, and then starting the defense right away came directly from there as a measure to increase intensity of the team sports. We've spoken about here, had a lot of influences in from American football, especially from the coaches and their process, especially the football coaches from the 80s try to read everything there is about those sports, and you see it also there. A lot of the same developments, even though the nature of the game is very different, but you can find these things from sports, but also from other areas of life. Sports is not its own island, that is separated from the human experience. So that's part of the reason why I enjoy coaching. It's such a holistic endeavor. It's got the teaching part, but it's got so many things: the psychology, the numbers. It's an endless thing to try to study and to try to get better. And I've always tried to separate my personal development. That one side is the better understanding of basketball and the actual sport, and the other side of the equation is a better understanding of what goes into coaching. And those are two different things. And coaching, you're always, whether you like it or not, you're always interacting one-on-one with a person, so in the end it comes down to the human factor and the communication there. That's a good example. Whereas the analysis of the game, where that's going, how we want to play, that's a different kind of branch. That's how I've organized the thoughts inside my head. So yes, try to use as much different inputs from everybody else.